The shuttle moved slowly toward the massive station that floated in the darkness of space. Daniel Carter sat near the window and looked out at the structure. It was beautiful in a cold way. The grand station was larger than most cities on Earth. Its towers reached out like silver fingers, and lights glowed from thousands of windows. This was the heart of the empire, one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the known galaxy. Daniel was 52 years old. He had gray hair at his temples and lines on his face from years of smiling and frowning and thinking. He had been a diplomat for Earth's United Coalition for almost 20 years. He had visited dozens of alien worlds. He had sat across tables from beings that looked nothing like humans. He had learned to be patient, to listen, to find common ground. But they were different. They were not interested in common ground. They believed they stood above everyone else. The shuttle docked with a soft sound. Daniel stood up and checked his formal uniform one more time. It was simple and dark blue with small golden symbols that showed his rank. He carried no weapons. Diplomats never did. A young officer named Brooks walked beside him. Was only 25, new to the diplomatic service, and nervous about everything. Sir, do you think they will agree to the trade terms? Asked. Daniel smiled a little. They will talk. Whether they agree is another matter. They do not like to seem eager for anything. They think it makes them look weak. They really believe they are better than everyone else, do they not? They do. They have lived for thousands of years while humans have only been traveling between stars for 300. To them, we are children, insects even. But we have something they need, so they invited us here. The doors opened, and they stepped into the station. The first thing Daniel noticed was how tall everything was. The ceilings rose so high that he could barely see them. The walls were covered with art that seemed to move and shift when he looked at it. Walked past in flowing robes of silver and purple. They were tall and thin, with skin that was pale blue and eyes that were solid black. They moved like dancers, every step careful and graceful. None of them looked at Daniel. It was as if he did not exist. A servant led them through long hallways to a great chamber where the reception was being held. Hundreds of nobles had gathered. They stood in small groups, talking quietly, their voices like music. At the far end of the chamber, on a raised platform, sat Emperor. He was ancient even by standards, his face lined with centuries of life. His eyes watched everything but showed nothing. Daniel walked toward the platform and bowed in the human fashion. "Your Imperial Majesty, I am Daniel Carter, Ambassador of Earth's United Coalition. I bring greetings from my people and hopes for friendship between our civilizations." The Emperor looked at him for a long moment. Then he nodded once. "You are welcome here, Ambassador. We shall speak of trade and partnership in the days to come." That was all. No warmth, no smile, just words. Daniel understood. This was how they were. He turned to mingle with the other guests, hopping to make some connections before the formal talks began. That was when he saw her. She stood near a window, looking out at the stars with obvious boredom. She was young for her features softer than the others, her robes a deep shade of violet. A circle of gold sat on her head, marking her as royalty. Daniel checked his memory. Princess, the youngest daughter of the Emperor. She was perhaps 200 years old, which made her a teenager by standards. Protocol said he should greet her. She was royalty, and ignoring her would be an insult. Daniel walked over to her with a friendly smile. "Your Highness, I am honored to meet you. I am Daniel Carter, representing Earth." She turned to look at him. Her black eyes moved up and down, studying him the way someone might study an insect that had landed on their food. Her face showed nothing but contempt. "I know who you are," she said. Her voice was loud enough that others nearby could hear. "You are the human ambassador. I was told I had to attend this tedious event because of you. I hope I can make it worth your time, Your Highness." She laughed. It was not a kind laugh. "Worth my time? Do you understand what my time is worth? I will live for 3,000 years. You will be dead in what, 30, 40? Your entire species has existed for the blink of an eye. Daniel kept his smile, though it became harder. We may be young, but we have accomplished much in our short time. Accomplished what? The princess stepped closer, and now others were watching. The nearby conversations had stopped. You breed like insects and die before you can learn anything of value. Your kind spreads across the galaxy like a disease, touching everything, understanding nothing. You are vermin. That is what my tutors taught me, and that is what I see when I look at you. The chamber had gone very quiet. Daniel felt the eyes of everyone on him. He saw the nobles watching with small smiles, amused by the show. He saw Brooks standing frozen, his face pale with shock. He saw the Emperor on his platform, watching without expression. He could argue. He could defend humanity. He could make speeches about human achievement, human courage, human spirit. But what would be the point? These people did not want to hear it. They had already decided what humans were. Nothing he said would change their minds. Daniel looked at the princess for a long moment. She stared back at him with cold triumph in her eyes, waiting for him to grovel or beg or shout. Instead, he simply said, "I understand." Then he bowed, turned, and walked away. He walked past the nobles who whispered and pointed. He walked past who started to follow. He walked through the great doors and down the long hallways and back to the shuttle dock. "Sir, what are you doing?" asked, struggling to keep up. "We are leaving." But the negotiations, the trade agreement, everything we came here for. Daniel stopped and looked at the young man. His face was calm, but his eyes were sad. "There is nothing for us here. These people do not want partners. They want servants. And humanity will not serve." They boarded the shuttle. Daniel sat by the window again and watched as the station grew smaller and smaller. His communication device buzzed with incoming messages from officials demanding to know why he was leaving. He turned it off. Behind him, on the station, He knew the princess was probably laughing with the other nobles about the foolish human who ran away with his tail between his legs. Let them laugh, he thought. They would learn soon enough that humans did not forget insults. And more importantly, they would learn what the galaxy looked like without humans in it. The shuttle entered faster than light travel, and the grand station vanished into the darkness. Daniel closed his eyes and thought about his garden back home in Colorado. He thought about tomato plants and summer sunshine and the smell of earth after rain. He would be home soon, and the would be alone. 1 week passed after the human ambassador left the station. Princess did not think about him at all. She returned to her normal life of lessons and entertainments, and the endless boredom of being young and royal. The incident at the reception became a funny story she told her friends. The way the human had looked so small and confused. The way he had simply walked away like a beaten animal. Her friends laughed when she told it. They agreed that humans were pathetic creatures, hardly worth noticing. Then strange things began to happen. The first report came from the Trade Ministry. A dozen human merchant ships that regularly traveled through space had changed their routes. They were no longer stopping at stations. When officials asked them why, they simply said they had found other customers. High Counselor brought this news to the Emperor during the morning council meeting. He was an old with silver hair and worried eyes. He had served the Empire for 800 years and had seen many problems come and go. "It is likely nothing, Your Majesty," he said. "Humans are emotional creatures. They are probably sulking about what happened at the reception. They will return when they realize they need our business." The Emperor nodded slowly. "Perhaps. Monitor the situation." 3 days later, more reports came. Human engineers working on a joint project to repair old satellites had packed their tools and left. They did not demand payment for the work they had already done. They did not complain or argue. They simply said their services were needed elsewhere and departed. The supervisors were confused. The humans had been working on those satellites for 2 years. They had never shown any problems before. Why would they leave now, with the work almost finished? 5 days after that, something worse happened. The communication relays in the outer sectors went silent. Rushed to explain this to the Emperor. These relays were built by humans 20 years ago. We paid them well for the work, but it seems they retained some control over the systems. They have shut them down remotely. Can we repair them? The Emperor asked. Our engineers are trying, but the human technology is different from ours. It will take time to understand how it works. Time, that was something they had always had plenty of. But now, suddenly, time felt short. The Emperor sent a formal message to Earth's United Coalition, demanding an explanation for these actions. The response came within a day. It was polite, even friendly, but it said almost nothing. Ambassador Carter has returned home to pursue other interests. Humanity wishes the Empire peace and prosperity. We have decided to focus our efforts on partnerships with civilizations that share our values. We hope you understand. There were no threats in the message, no demands for apologies, no anger at all. Just goodbye. Princess first heard about the problems from her handmaiden, a quiet young woman named who always knew the palace gossip before anyone else. They say the humans are leaving everywhere, whispered while brushing the princess's hair. Not just from our space, but from every project they worked on with us. Trade routes, research stations, medical facilities. They are simply packing up and going home. Good, said. We do not need them. Let them crawl back to their little planet. But later that day, she overheard her father talking with his advisors, and for the first time, she heard worry in his ancient voice. The consortium has announced a new trade agreement with Earth. One advisor said, exclusive rights to human medical compounds for the next 50 years. The Emperor's voice was sharp. They are our rivals. They have always been our rivals. Yes, your majesty. And now they have what we do not. The medical compounds. Knew about those. Human scientists had developed medicines that helped other species deal with certain types of stellar radiation. They had several colonies near active stars where this radiation was a problem. They had been buying human medicine for decades. It was cheap and effective, and nobody thought much about it. Now, suddenly, they could not buy it anymore. 2 weeks later, the first illness reports came from the border colonies. People were getting sick. Not many, not yet, but the numbers were growing. Without the human medicine, their bodies could not fight off the radiation damage. Made another report to the council. His face was grim. We have tried to make our own version of the medicine. Our scientists say it will take at least 5 years to develop something that works as well as the human version. In the meantime, we must find other sources. What other sources? Another counselor asked. There are none. The humans were the only ones who made this medicine. Other species bought it from them just as we did. The room was silent. Stood outside the council chamber, listening through a crack in the door. She felt something cold growing in her stomach. It might have been fear, though she did not want to admit it. A month passed. The problems grew worse. It turned out that humans had been doing many things throughout the galaxy that nobody had really noticed. They ran small trading posts on distant stations. They taught languages and customs at alien academies. They repaired old machines that their original builders had forgotten how to fix. They delivered messages and packages to places that larger ships could not reach. None of these things seemed important on their own, but together they formed a web that connected everything. And when the humans, that web began to fall apart. They found themselves unable to get certain spare parts for their ships. Certain foods that they imported from distant worlds stopped arriving. Certain information networks that they relied upon went dark. And other species began to notice. The Federation, a civilization that had always respected the sent a message asking what had happened. "The humans say you insulted them," the message said. "They say they are no longer welcome in your space. Is this true? We find it hard to believe that the great empire would behave so foolishly." The consortium sent a different kind of message. It was full of sympathy that was clearly fake. "We are so sorry to hear about your difficulties. Perhaps if you had treated the humans with more respect, this would not have happened. But do not worry, we will be happy to sell you the things you need. Our prices are very reasonable." Everyone knew that prices were never reasonable. An emperor summoned his daughter to his private chambers. When she arrived, he was standing by the window, looking out at the stars. He did not turn around when she entered. "Tell me exactly what you said to the human ambassador," he said. Felt her throat tighten. Father, I only said what our tutors taught us, that humans are short-lived, that they spread across the galaxy without understanding it. I called them vermin." Vermin. The emperor's voice was flat. "You called a diplomatic representative of a sovereign civilization vermin in front of the entire court." "Yes, Father." He finally turned to look at her. His ancient face showed no anger, which somehow made it worse. "Do you understand what you have done? Do you understand that your words may have cost us more than 1,000 battles ever could?" "They are just humans," she whispered. "They are nothing." "Nothing." The emperor shook his head. "They are everything, child. They are the threads that hold the galaxy together, and you cut those threads with your thoughtless tongue." He turned back to the window. "Leave me. I must think about how to fix this mess you have made, if it can be fixed at all." Fled from the chamber with tears burning in her eyes. For the first time in her young life, she was beginning to understand that she had made a terrible mistake. 2 months had passed since Daniel Carter walked away from the Grand Station. The galaxy had changed in ways that nobody had expected. Daniel sat on his back porch in Colorado, watching the sun set behind the mountains. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink and purple. A cup of coffee grew cold in his hands. He had forgotten to drink it again. His garden stretched out before him, rows of tomato plants and peppers and beans. Working in the dirt helped him think. It reminded him that some things were simple and good and did not require negotiation or careful words. The screen door opened behind him and his sister Laura stepped out. She was 3 years younger than him, with the same gray-touched hair and the same tired smile. She had come to visit when she heard what happened. She had not left yet. "There is another news report about she said, sitting down in the chair beside him. "Their border colonies are getting worse. The sickness is spreading." Daniel nodded slowly. "I heard." "Do you feel bad about it?" He thought about that for a long moment. "I feel bad that people are suffering. I always feel bad about that, but I did not cause their suffering. Their own pride caused it. They had 300 years to learn how to make that medicine themselves. They chose not to because it was easier to buy it from us. And now you will not sell it to them." "We are not refusing to sell it. We have simply moved our business elsewhere. They are happy to buy everything we make. There is nothing left over for the." Laura was quiet for a while. Then she said, "I saw an interview with you on the net. The one where you talked about your garden." Daniel smiled a little. "Yes. The reporter wanted me to say angry things about the princess. I told her about tomatoes instead." The princess watched that interview. It is all over the alien news networks. They say she has been very quiet lately. Not so proud anymore. Good. Maybe she is learning something. The sun dipped lower. The first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. "Do you think they will apologize?" Laura asked. "I do not know. They have never apologized for anything in their entire history. They believe they are always right. Admitting they were wrong would go against everything they are." "Then what happens?" Daniel finally took a sip of his cold coffee and made a face. "Then they learn to live without us, or they change. One or the other. It is not my choice to make. It is theirs. Far away on the grand station, Princess was also watching the stars, but she found no peace in them. Everything had gotten worse since her father's angry words. The border colonies were now in full crisis. Hundreds were sick with radiation poisoning. The hospitals were full. The doctors did not have the medicine they needed. And everyone blamed her. They did not say it to her face. They were too polite for that, too careful with their words around royalty. But she could see it in their eyes. She could hear it in the whispers that stopped when she walked into a room. The princess who doomed the empire. That was what they called her when they thought she could not hear. Her old friends no longer wanted to spend time with her. The nobles who had laughed at her story about the human ambassador now pretended they had never been there. Even her own sisters looked at her with something that might have been pity or might have been contempt. She spent most of her days alone in her chambers, watching the news reports from across the galaxy. The consortium had announced another new partnership with Earth. This time it was about technology sharing. Human engineers would help them build better ships. Human doctors would train medical students. Human teachers would come to schools. The Federation had done something similar. So had the Republic and the Outer Worlds Alliance. Species that had once looked up to the Empire were now turning to humanity instead. And the humans welcomed them all with open arms. That was the part did not understand. The humans did not seem angry. They did not demand revenge or make threats. They simply smiled and said they were happy to help anyone who wanted their help. When reporters asked them about they said polite things. They hoped they would find their way through these difficult times. They wished them well. They bore no grudges. It was maddening. One evening, her old tutor came to visit her. He was ancient even by standards, with white hair that fell to his shoulders and a face like cracked leather. He had taught her history and politics for most of her young life. "May I sit?" he asked, gesturing to a chair near her window. She nodded without speaking. He sat down slowly, his old bones creaking. For a while, he just looked out at the stars with her, saying nothing. Finally, he spoke. "Do you know why I asked to be your tutor all those years ago?" "Because my father ordered you to." "No, your father gave me a choice. I chose you because I saw something special in you, a spark of curiosity, a desire to understand things. Most young are content to accept what they are told. You always asked why." Felt tears threatening to form. She pushed them back. "I was a fool. All my questions, all my learning, and I still said something so stupid that I may have destroyed my own people." "Yes," agreed. "You were a fool, but you are young. The young are supposed to be foolish. That is how they learn. Tell that to the people dying on the border worlds." The old tutor was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Let me tell you something about humans that your other tutors never taught you, because they did not understand it themselves." They turned to look at him. "Humans live for perhaps 80 or 90 years if they are lucky. That is nothing to us. We live for thousands of years. We have time to learn everything slowly, to make mistakes and correct them over centuries. Humans do not have that luxury. They must learn fast, act fast, live fast. Every moment matters to them in a way it does not matter to us. I know this. That is why they are inferior." "No," shook his head. "That is why they are strong. Their short lives make them value every connection, every friendship, every moment of kindness. They do not have time to hold grudges. They do not have time to wait for things to change on their own. They make things happen." He leaned forward. "When you insulted that ambassador, you did not just insult one man. You told him that his entire life, his entire species was worthless. You told him that nothing he could ever do would matter. And do you know what he did? He left." "Yes, he left. He did not argue or fight or beg. He simply walked away and took everything good that humans had given us with him, because he understood something that we never have." "What is that?" smiled sadly. That the best response to contempt is not anger, it is absence. When someone tells you that you do not matter, the most powerful thing you can do is prove them wrong by showing them how much they need you. I stared at him. Something was shifting inside her. Some wall she had built to protect herself from the truth. The humans are not punishing us, she whispered. They are just not being here anymore. Exactly. And in not being here, they have shown us how much they were always doing for us, how much we depended on them without ever knowing it, how much we needed them while we were calling them vermin. The princess looked out at the stars again. Somewhere out there, on a small blue planet, a tired diplomat was tending to his garden and drinking cold coffee, and not thinking about revenge at all. And somehow, that simple fact hurt more than any weapon ever could. "What do I do?" she asked. "How do I fix this?" Stood up slowly. "That is the first wise question you have asked in months. I cannot answer it for you. But I can tell you this: the first step is always the same. You must understand what you did wrong. Truly understand it. Not because you were caught, not because you are being punished, but because it was wrong." He walked to the door and paused. "Think about that, princess. Think about who you want to be. The answer will come." Then he was gone, and she was alone with the stars once more. 6 months had passed since the incident at the reception. The empire was falling apart. The border colonies had been evacuated. The sick were being treated in hospitals on the inner worlds, but the medicine shortage meant that many would not recover. The economy was struggling as trade routes collapsed, and former partners turned to other allies. Species that had once sought favor now openly mocked them on the galactic networks. Emperor sat alone in his throne room, looking older than he had ever looked before. His advisors had run out of ideas. His counselors had run out of excuses. The pride of 1,000 years was crumbling like dust. He called for his youngest daughter, came to him dressed simply, without her royal jewels or fine robes. She had changed in the past months. The arrogance was gone from her face. Something else had taken its place. Something that looked like sorrow and determination mixed together. "Father," she said, bowing low. "Daughter." He studied her for a long moment. "You look different." "I feel different." "Good, because I am going to ask you to do something difficult." She waited, her hands clasped before her. "You will go to Earth," the Emperor said. "Alone, you will find the human ambassador, and you will apologize to him personally, face to face." Had expected something like this. She nodded slowly. "I understand." Do you? This is not a game. You will not go as a princess of the Empire. You will go as a young woman who made a terrible mistake and wishes to make amends. You will not demand anything. You will not threaten anything. You will simply ask for forgiveness and hope that it is given. And if it is not given, the Emperor's old eyes were tired but steady. Then you will accept that too. Sometimes we do not get what we want, even when we are sorry. That is one of the hardest lessons anyone can learn. Bowed again. "I will leave immediately." "One more thing." The Emperor's voice softened slightly. "I am proud of you." She looked up in surprise. "Proud? I nearly destroyed everything you built." "Yes, and now you are trying to fix it. That takes more courage than anything else you could do. Remember that when you face the human." The journey to Earth took 3 weeks in a small diplomatic shuttle. Traveled with only one attendant, a quiet woman named who had been her nurse when she was a child. She spent most of the journey looking out at the stars and thinking about what she would say. She had practiced her apology 100 times. She had written it down, memorized it, spoken it to empty rooms. But none of the words felt right. None of them seemed big enough for what she had done. When the shuttle finally entered Earth's solar system, she was surprised by how beautiful it was. A yellow sun burned at the center, warm and welcoming. Planets of different colors orbited in graceful patterns. And there, third from the sun, was Earth itself. It was smaller than she had expected. a blue and green ball floating in the darkness. Clouds swirled across its surface like white paint on a canvas. From up here, it looked fragile and precious, like something that needed to be protected. This was where humans came from. This was their home. The shuttle landed at a port near a city called Denver. Had never been on an alien planet before, and she found herself staring at everything. The sky was blue, not the purple she was used to. The air smelled different, full of scents she could not name. Humans walked past in groups, laughing and talking, paying no attention to the tall alien woman with pale blue skin. Nobody treated her like a princess here. Nobody bowed or made way for her. She was just another visitor. It took most of a day to find Daniel Carter's address. He lived in a small house in the mountains, about an hour outside the city. Rented a ground vehicle and drove there herself, leaving at the port. The road wound through forests of tall green trees and past streams of clear water. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks covered with snow. It was nothing like the cold beauty of the. This was a different kind of beauty, wild and alive and growing. She found the house at the end of a dirt road. It was small and simple, made of wood and stone. Smoke rose from a chimney. A garden stretched out in front, rows of plants growing in neat lines. And there, kneeling in the dirt with his hands buried in the soil, was Daniel Carter. He looked up when her vehicle stopped. His face showed surprise for a moment, then settled into something calm and patient. He stood up slowly, wiping his hands on his pants, got out of the vehicle and walked toward him. Her heart was pounding in her chest. All the words she had practiced seemed to have vanished from her mind. "Ambassador Carter," she said. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "Princess," he nodded politely. "You have come a long way." "Yes." She stood there feeling lost. Then, without planning to, she dropped to her knees in the dirt of his garden. Daniel's eyebrows rose slightly. "There is no need for that. Please stand up." "No," she shook her head. I came here to apologize. I will do it properly." He was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled over 2 wooden chairs and sat down in one. "If you must kneel, at least kneel comfortably. And when you are done, sit with me. I just made lemonade." It was such a simple, human thing to say that almost laughed. Instead, she took a deep breath and began. "What I said to you 6 months ago was cruel and wrong. I called your people vermin. I mocked your short lives and your place in the galaxy. I was arrogant and ignorant and filled with a pride that I did not earn." She looked up at him, her black eyes meeting his brown ones. "I am sorry. Not because my people are suffering, not because my father sent me here. I am sorry because I was wrong. I know that now. I have learned what your people truly are." "And what are we?" Daniel asked quietly. "You are the ones who hold everything together. You teach and heal and build and connect. You make the galaxy better simply by being in it. And I stood there in my fine robes and told you that none of it mattered." Her voice cracked. "I was a fool." Daniel did not speak for a long time. He looked at her kneeling in his garden. This proud princess who had traveled across the galaxy to apologize to an old man. Finally, he said, "Stand up, please. Come sit with me." She rose on shaking legs and sat in the chair beside him. He handed her a glass of something cold and yellow. She took a sip and found it sweet and sour at the same time. Strange, but not bad. "I forgive you," Daniel said simply. She stared at him. Just like that. Just like that. Holding grudges is not something I have time for. Besides, you meant what you said just now. I can see it in your eyes. You have changed. But my people are still suffering. The damage I caused. That damage was not caused by you alone." Daniel looked out at his mountains. "Your people built an empire on the idea that they did not need anyone else. You just said out loud what they all believed. What happened after I left would have happened eventually, one way or another. You just made it happen sooner. Then there is no hope, no way to repair what was broken." Daniel smiled, and for the first time she saw warmth in it. There is always hope, but it requires change, true change, not just words but actions, not just apologies but a new way of thinking. He turned to look at her directly. Can your people change? Can they learn to see other species as equals instead of inferiors? Thought about her father, her sisters, the nobles and counselors and ordinary citizens of the empire. Could they change? Could 1,000 years of pride be undone? I do not know, she admitted, but I can try to show them how. I can try to be different and hope that others follow. Daniel nodded slowly. That is all any of us can do. Try to be better and hope that it matters. He stood up and offered her his hand. Come, let me show you my garden. The tomatoes are almost ready to harvest. You can help me pick them. And so the princess of the empire spent the rest of the afternoon picking tomatoes with a human diplomat, learning the names of vegetables she had never seen before, and feeling something she had not felt in a very long time. A hope. Princess stood before the imperial council. The great chamber was filled with the most powerful nobles of the empire. Her father sat on his throne above them all, watching with ancient eyes that showed nothing. She had returned from Earth 3 days ago. The news of her journey had spread across the empire. Some called her brave. Others called her a traitor. Most simply waited to see what would happen next. Now it was time to speak. I have come to tell you what I learned, she began. Her voice was steady, stronger than it had been 6 months ago. I went to Earth expecting to find a simple people on a simple world. I expected to apologize, to say the right words, and to come home with a trade agreement in my hands. She paused and looked around the chamber. I was wrong. All the nobles shifted in their seats. This was not what they had expected to hear. The human ambassador, Daniel Carter, forgave me within minutes of my arrival. He did not demand payment or favors or promises. He simply forgave me because he did not want to spend his limited time holding grudges. Then he showed me his garden. He taught me how to pick vegetables. He told me about his family and his hopes and his fears. Stepped forward. Do you understand? This man who I had insulted in front of the entire court spent an afternoon teaching me about tomatoes. Because that is who humans are. They do not waste time on anger. They are too busy living. An old noble near the front raised his hand. Pretty words, Your Highness, but our colonies are still suffering. Our economy is still failing. What does any of this have to do with solving our real problems? Everything. She turned to face him directly. Our problems exist because we built our entire civilization on a lie. We told ourselves that we were better than everyone else. We told ourselves that we did not need anyone. We looked down on species like humans because they lived short lives and came from a small planet. And because we believed these things, we never bothered to notice how much we depended on them. She spread her hands wide. We need them. Not just for medicine or technology or trade. We need them because they connect us to the rest of the galaxy. When we drove them away, we drove away our connection to everything else. The chamber was very quiet now. I am here to propose a new way forward, a new doctrine for the Empire. Took a deep breath. This was the moment that would decide everything. We must stop seeing ourselves as superior to younger species. We must start seeing them as partners, equals, friends. The reaction was immediate. Angry voices rose from all corners of the chamber. Nobles shouted at each other and at her. Someone called her a disgrace to her ancestors. Someone else demanded that she be removed from the succession. But through all the noise she stood firm, and she noticed something else. Not everyone was shouting. Some of the nobles were quiet, watching her with thoughtful eyes. Some were nodding slowly. And on his throne, her father had the smallest hint of a smile on his ancient face. The emperor raised his hand, and silence fell instantly. My daughter speaks wisdom, he said. His voice carried across the chamber like thunder. We have been proud for too long. That pride has cost us dearly. Perhaps it is time to try something different. The old noble who had challenged her before stood up. "Your Majesty, with respect, what you are suggesting goes against 1,000 years of tradition. How can we simply declare that other species are our equals? The people will never accept it." "Then the people will learn," the emperor replied, "just as my daughter learned, the hard way if necessary." He looked at, "You will lead this effort. You will be my ambassador to the galaxy. You will show our people that change is possible." She bowed low. "Yes, father." The council meeting ended without a vote, but everyone knew that a decision had been made. The old ways were over. Something new was beginning. In the months that followed, change came slowly but steadily to the empire. Princess traveled to Earth and spoke before the United Coalition. She gave a full public apology for her words, broadcast across every network in the galaxy. She spoke of human kindness, human resilience, and the quiet dignity of a diplomat who responded to insults by tending his garden. She proposed new treaties and partnerships based on mutual respect rather than hierarchy. She invited human teachers and doctors and engineers to return to space, not as servants but as honored guests. She established exchange programs where young would live among humans and learn their ways. Not everyone supported her. Many nobles resisted. Some called her names behind her back. A few tried to block her efforts through politics and manipulation. But slowly the tide turned. Humans began to return. At first just a few, cautious and uncertain. But when they saw that things were really different, that they were being treated with genuine respect, more followed. Trade routes reopened. Research projects resumed. The medicine flowed again. And with the humans came others. Species that had turned away from the now gave them a second chance. The Federation, the Republic, even the Consortium, though they grumbled about losing their advantage. The galaxy watched in amazement as one of the oldest and proudest civilizations in known space learned to be humble. 1 year after the incident at the reception, a ceremony was held on the Grand Station. It was smaller than the grand events of the past, but in many ways more meaningful. Earth and the Empire signed a new partnership agreement, one built on equality and mutual benefit. Daniel Carter came out of retirement to sign on behalf of humanity. He wore the same simple dark uniform he had worn a year ago. His hair was a little grayer, his face a little more lined, but his eyes were warm. Princess stood beside him as the documents were signed. When it was over, she bowed to him in the human fashion, a gesture she had once mocked. Thank you," she said quietly, so only he could hear. "Thank you for not giving up on us." Daniel shook his head. "I never gave up on you. I just stepped back so you could find your own way forward. That is what humans do. We believe everyone can grow, even ancient empires." She smiled at that. It was strange how easy smiling had become since she stopped trying to be superior to everyone. The reception that followed was different from the one a year ago. Humans and mingled together, talking and laughing like old friends. There was no stiff formality, no careful hierarchy, just people enjoying each other's company. Found herself standing by the same window where she had insulted Daniel a year ago. She looked out at the stars, thinking about how much had changed. A small hand tugged at her robe. She looked down and saw a human child, a little girl with brown hair and curious eyes. She could not have been older than 7 years old. She was one of the children from the new exchange program. "Excuse me," the girl said. "Are you really a princess?" Knelt down so she could look the child in the eyes. "I am. My name is." "That is a pretty name. I am Lily." The girl smiled. "Is it true that you live for thousands of years?" "Yes, that is true." "Wow," Lily's eyes went wide. "You must know so many things." Thought about that. A year ago, she would have agreed. She would have said that her long life made her wiser and better than creatures who lived so briefly. Now she knew better. "I know some things," she said, "but I still have much to learn. In fact, A human taught me one of the most important lessons I have ever learned. What lesson? That every moment matters. That kindness is more powerful than pride. And that the best thing you can do when someone hurts you is to show them a better way. Lily nodded seriously, though she probably did not understand all of it. Then she smiled again and waved before running off to find her parents. Stood up and watched her go. A human child, so small and fragile and full of life. She would grow old and die before looked any different than she did today. And yet that brief life would matter. It would touch other lives, create ripples that spread outward through time and space. Just as Daniel Carter's life had mattered, just as every human life mattered. She finally understood. Humans were not weak because they died. They were strong because they lived so fully in the time they had. They burned bright because they burned briefly. And that brightness could light up even the darkest corners of the galaxy. Looked out at the stars one more time. The same stars she had watched while feeling sorry for herself. The same stars that had seemed so cold and empty. Now they seemed full of possibility. One act of cruelty had nearly destroyed her civilization. One act of quiet dignity had saved it. And in the end, the greatest lesson came from a man who walked away, went home to his garden, and waited for the universe to find its own way to wisdom. That was the human way. And now, perhaps, it could be the way too